First question, is there an expectation for arc flash potential risk to have been calculated and controlled where activities may involve an arc flash hazard?
There's a standard which actually there was another question further up. 4836 talks about safe working on or near low voltage electrical installations, etc. Now, again, it comes back to the risk assessment. Obviously, the first stage for us is we prohibit works on or near live electrical equipment. We prefer the de-energization, but in some situations that's not at all possible in terms of we're not working live because we're in the near zone. We look for the physical barriers and things like that. Again, where there is a potential risk for an arc flash, we would actually expect that it gets mitigated before we get to wearing arc-rated clothing. However, certain industries and certain areas where we do work in switchboards where we're in one cubicle and the cubicle adjacent is an example, we expect that the electricians have gone to the stage of saying, well, there is a potential, albeit we can manage most of those down to being eliminated, but where they can't be eliminated, then we look to the company to actually determine that arc-rated clothing is applicable. Again, we come back to 4836 and the risk assessment process, but we also then would refer back to other controls in terms of additional training and requirements for those workers. We look for the LV rescue and the processes and the protocols around that, and sort of questions in around that. Some examples are where we're working in a hospital. As an example, you can't de-energize a whole switch room because you want to do works in there. So there are certain conditions which it'll prompt that. So yes, but it does come back to that risk assessment process first.
Thanks, Adam. Anything to add on that, Steve or Phil?
No, I think Adam's covered it. And really, that's the only time we've had to do deviation risk assessments is working in hospitals, where turning power off creates a greater risk to people's lives.
Yep. We did have a question, actually, we might continue in that vein. Someone has asked, what's the trigger for retrospective installation of RCDs and body protective circuits in healthcare facilities?
So RCDs are mandatory for any construction installation. So in other words, construction wiring used for the purposes has to have an RCD. So that's retrospective, it's a mandatory. The body protection stuff just basically is a lower rated RCD. In other words, it goes into certain other conditions where it'll trip faster, and there's other conditions that the actual system has to meet. Very rarely do we see that in construction industry because we don't, it's designed for patient protection, where they're on things like defibs or they're on a heart monitor and things like that, where they can't actually be subjected to. So those sorts of conditions are usually for the equipment for the medical profession to plug into, not necessarily for the construction industry. So they're usually installed for the actual end use, not necessarily for the actual workers themselves.
Okay, and someone's asked as well, Adam, is there an FSC requirement for lockable covers RCDs on temporarily electrical distribution boards on construction sites?
No, technically not. So it used to be part of the New South Wales Code of Practice had a fixed lockable cover, and a few other states had some things like that as well. That got phased out in 2011 when we went to harmonisation, and we adopted 3012. So it talks about having a lockable lid or door on the actual switchboard so that we can lock it to prevent inadvertent use if we're, after hours or we need to lock it. We can do that, but there is no requirement in any piece of legislation at this point in time that mandates a fixed lockable cover over the RCDs. Again, from a risk base, some companies will take that approach because if an RCD trips, then they have to get somebody to unlock it, rather than just going and resetting it and seeing the same fault reoccur to a point where it can then present as something different. So from a risk base, companies are quite, they're quite within their rights to mandate that in a switchboard. Usually that's done in contract specifications, etc., but it's not actually a mandatory requirement.
You also mentioned before reference to the question about 4836. Someone has asked if that's something that's required to be referenced in safe work method statements, which address LV works or near other live circuits.
Yeah, and in the safety management system, yeah, definitely. If we're working in that space, that's a document that we would go to. So it provides further guidance on what consists of what a barrier can consist of, the materials of the barrier. It goes into even things around the LV rescue kits, the arc-rated clothing, the specifics around the works in and around working on or near. So generally we say it's a very small industry that would actually seek that document, only because most projects can do their isolations and not technically work on the installation. The question then comes in as to near, and in terms of what's the risk when they're working near. Is it working near an insulated cable, or is it working near a switchboard that has a potential live bus bar to which you have to manage that approach? So that's again where we look to that risk assessment and then the reference back to that document.
And we've had a few questions, a lot of interest in the SHAPE app. Phil and Steve, where can people find that? Where is that available?
Yeah, it's available via your app store, and you can also access it by the SHAPE website.
Okay.
Online. So currently we've got our business technology team just looking at a little problem with an update. So that will, if you can't access it now, try again in about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. You should be able to access it and download it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's very useful. It's amazing the tech these days that companies can have these specific apps that can share a lot of that information. So back on RCDs, regarding the basic RCD push button test, the annual test permitted to be done by site supervisors who are not qualified electricians?
So I'll just clarify, it's not an annual test. We'd run back to table 6 within AS 3012, which gives the conditions under the test. So that gives you a lot of variables as dependent on whether it's a fixed or portable system. So obviously portable systems being the little boxes that we carry around and put out in the field, fixed being the ones that are on switchboards that are in a position where they're not subject to movement and other things. So when we go to that point, we look to, so push button test on non-portable fixed in the construction industry as an example is a monthly push test. We would expect that a competent person can conduct the push test. So it doesn't require an electrician because literally you don't take any covers off. All you do is lift the switchboard open, you push the button and it works or it doesn't. So it's a case of when it trips and turns itself off, then we know that it's functional in terms of the push button test, and we tend to see that. Now, some companies record that in different ways and means. Some will do it as a electrician will go around and do all those things for them on a monthly basis and do the other testing that they need to do as well. Others will come up with different strategies, but the idea is a competent person being, a person that can open up and push the button and understand what it does. And if it doesn't trip, then how do we report that?
And regarding, you mentioned portable boxes, someone's asked about Spinifex boxes.
Spinifex. Yeah,
yes.
So they're colloquial called Spinifex is a brand. They call them spider boards. They call them all sorts of names. They're essentially an extension to the installation. Can be a 3-phase cable that's a plug-in box into the basically system where it's hardwired into the temporary switchboard. It goes further out and drops down somewhere. The requirement for switchboards in a construction as per 3012 is it's either fixed down to the ground, securely mounted to a permanent structure such as a wall or the floor or a post, or be of a freestanding design. So if it's designed to stand by itself on the ground, then we would accept that that's okay. Now, again, that was an OFI, which is a suggestion. Generally, the OFIs come in where it's not an actual requirement, but they should consider it, just to clarify that as well. But what we look for with the Spinifex and the like is if there's a pressure that can be exerted on that box that's going to cause it to topple over, in terms of if we pull on one of the cables, one of the extension leads or one of the things that are attached to it and it's potentially to fall over, then that's where the company then needs to fix it down in terms of protection. Generally, though, they are of a suitable freestanding design and it's not requirement in any state for it to be fixed down.
Someone's asked what the OFSC stance on the use of HD orange conduit to protect temporary construction wiring in above ground situations.
Yep. So HD orange conduit is designed for underground installations, grey for above ground. Orange is not UV stabilised. So what you'll find is after a month or two of being in the sun, it deteriorates to a point where it's no longer mechanical protection over the top. So the answer is no. We have had situations where the standard does allow for paint to be applied over the top of the conduit to change colour and to UV protect. So we go to that stage, but generally AS 3000 says no.
How often do fixed RCDs require? How often are they required to be tested and tagged with stickers? And is this monthly or quarterly, or is it their specific time frame?
Well, it depends on its if it's a construction and the type. So we probably wouldn't answer that directly. We'd say there's table 6 and there's also 3760, which give guidance on that. So typically table 6 talks to 3 monthly on portable, 12 monthly on non-portable. Then we go into transportable structures. Then we look to 3760 as well, which gives further guidance. So again, it's up to the company to take those 2 tables, the one out of 3760 and the one out of table 6, and determine what RCD it actually, or what slot that RCD fits into, what the installation is, and then you get your testing frequency.
I think that will draw the end of our Q&A session. I'd like to thank again Adam, Phil and Steve. That's been really, really useful and excellent. Hopefully a lot of the attendees, I think we had over 400 people in here at one point, we'll all have gotten a lot out of that, and we can help reduce issues regarding electrical hazard management on site. Thank you all for attending, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.